Good afternoon, or I can almost say good evening. First of all, thank you very much for coming here. I know this has been a long week, and it's the last day of that long week. So when I looked at the schedule, I was like thinking, oh, probably I'm gonna be alone in a big cinema room. But yeah, so I'm totally happy that you all made it, and I'm not gonna put this into extra length. I also don't think this is a very challenging to listen talk, so I hope you have just a bit of an experience where you can sit back, relax in your comfortable chairs, and watch a bit of presentation and live demo, and then go happily home after this conference. Okay, so before I start, just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Matthias. I come from the city of Stuttgart, so about 3 hours away from here. If you want to get in touch with me or reach out, you can most likely find me on pretty much all social networks, but I mostly use LinkedIn and Twitter. I still call it Twitter, but I know it has a new name now. My role at my company Novatech is dealing heavily with technologies. Most likely technologies people use for cloud-native software engineering. So this is like partially coding stuff, then also DevOps toolings and container and platform technologies. And I'm also teaching in this field at 2 universities. So I'm lecturing distributed systems and modern software architecture in 2 universities in the area of Stuttgart. And a lot of my talks and things that I do originate out of that, but luckily it also overlaps a lot with what I'm doing in real life. Now, yeah, why this talk, or how did I come to this talk? And this one was actually originating out more of my uni lectures. So in the world of distributed computing or distributed systems, I want my students kind of to build a landscape with polyglot distributed applications, to see all the things about connecting different services, different protocols, how quickly can you stand up things in different languages, container technology, caching, persistence, and everything what it takes. And of course, very often the landscapes of applications that we design and implement for our clients look fairly similar. So to boil down things a little bit in the first place, I tried to make them all aware of the importance of a clean API and contract and services talking to each other. So I kind of build a sample application, let's say, that exposes a REST API, and I will build a front end for that. And then I basically manifest that API and say, now it's your turn. So you please pick a language, pick a framework of your choice, but not the ones that I'm using, and build either like a front end or like a client or a server part to that API. But the important thing is they need to be able to talk to each other exchangeably. And I say, okay, please put everything into a container, potentially provide a Docker Compose file, put everything into Git so that I can easily look into and review that stuff. So a lot of practices that I think, okay, are probably helpful for later on life in cleaner software engineering. Now, we of course have problems and challenges. So we face things like programming skill, container skill, operating system skills sometimes. Remote debugging was pretty much during the COVID phase, and also the part of setting up your development environment. So what do you think, what takes the most time? Any idea? It's kind of easy if you look at the title of my talk, which is about development environments. So as nobody's raising a hand, I guess you figured it already. It's like setting up the local development environment. And the sad thing with that is people don't really learn a lot about distributed systems or modern software when setting up their development environment. This is just very painfully time-consuming, and it also distracts me and other lecturers really from getting into the actual stuff. So often students don't have laptops with admin rights, so they might not be able to install container runtimes. Sometimes they have like various versions of like JDKs installed and everything. So this can be really kind of frustrating and time consuming. Now, so the scenario that we have, so we have our clients or like students that connect to an IDE and shell, then to GitHub and Docker Hub to build all their thing. And with the last 2 or 3 years, we started to adopt this kind of web-based technologies for development environment, in particular GitHub Codespaces and Gitpod. This significantly made the life easier because I was able to kind of basically pre-build a containerized environment and say, okay, we got all the necessary language runtimes and whatever we need in there, and nobody needs to develop anything on their local machine. So they can just like open a web page, log into that, and then build their whatever kind of application, run them, and also easily expose them so that other students or myself can access them without any problems by just logging on the website on the internet. Another very important feature or helpful feature is there that within those environments there's normally a container runtime. So you don't have the dependency to set up Docker or anything else on your local machine. And in particular, nowadays, I'm facing the problem sometimes with the container builds on my ARM-based Mac, so it's not like an Intel-based one anymore, and not all of the images are kind of compatible with each other. This is also not the case because most of these things are running in a Linux environment somewhere in the cloud. The good thing, it's mostly free. I mean, it's not entirely free, but you have like kind of trial versions. This screenshot might be a bit outdated, so they changed it from time to time. But what I normally figure out is like they have about 40 hours or so every month with those options. That is probably not enough for a full-time developer job, but it's definitely enough like to look into a couple of things for a certain point of time, then throw it away again. And if you want to use it further, you can of course pay it. It's not super expensive, but it's what I'm trying to say is it's really easy to try out and see if it works for you. Now, these are the 3 things that we're going to look into today about those technologies. Like I said, Codespaces, Gitpod, and Devpod. So who in here has used Codespaces before? I see a few hands. Who has used Gitpod before? And has anyone used Devpod? Okay. Well, this is all, I mean, this is a bit different, but if you get like the point of the others, this will be easy to understand for you as well. So these are kind of the things that I'm trying to introduce today. So with Codespaces, and I'm probably try to do most of those things live if my internet is stable enough. I'm not a big fan of just screenshots. They're just primarily for backup. So I am going to create an entire new repository. So I'm going to call this jcon24. I'm going to initialize it with a README file and then just create the repository. So everything is entirely naked and from scratch. There's nothing pre-set up, so this will be the same style for you if you do that yourself. And then I guess most people familiar with GitHub have ever seen this code button here before. Normally you copy that URL for like a local clone. But there's also this Codespace tab where you can say create Codespace on a certain branch. So we only have that main branch at the moment, so I'm going to click that. And this by default will spin up a Visual Studio Code in browser kind of environment. But not just that, it will also create a container somewhere in the cloud where this Visual Studio Code points to. So it's not pointing to my local machine. It's basically running an environment somewhere as a service where we don't know. And as I don't have any code in there yet, it also cannot guess what might I actually be trying here. So it's just going to say it uses the default image, which provides runtimes for Python, Node, Docker, and more. So if I look in here, I say Java minus. Is that big enough? Okay. Say Java minus version. We are at 21.02. This is fairly recent. This is fine. If I say Docker, I have a Docker daemon running, and I can start doing my things. So let's maybe try to spin up a quick application. So who has ever seen a talk from Josh Long? Nobody. I'm surprised. So his favorite web page in the world is the Spring Initializer that I'm going to use here as well. So normally people use it on the website, but you can actually use it also through curl. So if you do that, it's going to list you all the options that you normally get to pre-build or pre-configure a Spring application. So I'm going to copy a few things here. So I want to build an application. No, I don't want. There will probably be a few pop-ups now, because as I said, it's a really new environment. Not all of the plugins and things are installed, and I need to tell it to allow copy and paste. Yes, please. So I'm going to say I want an actuator, web and actuator. I'm going to say Java version should be 21. I would like to have a type Maven project. So if you don't do all those things, you basically just get the default settings. And I'm calling this, and I'm going to download this as a file, demo zip. So this zip file has now been downloaded, and I can say unzip demo.zip. And this will basically expand all the code to me. So if I now click into Java, it will most likely detect that I'm using Java and suggest the extension for the Java language. And I'm going to install that. So all those things you could potentially pre-configure and say, okay, I want a dev container that has all those things already set up. I did not do this on purpose, just to show you how it feels when you do that for the first time. And then I have to accept and do all those things. This is fine. So maybe I can also say, please detect my Java project. So then it can get all the auto-completion and things like that. So basically, already at this point, can I get this away maybe? Sorry. I could potentially run it. So I have not built anything in my code yet, but I can say, okay, Spring would run. Yes, please. And it would fire up my application. Now, it has, of course, no Maven cache, because it's in a fresh container. So in the first run, it will also have to download half of the internet to get started. But then eventually would get there, and it's going to tell a port is now available to access. So if I click on that page, hi, Demi, and open that browser icon there, so it's going to say, OK, connecting to the forwarded port, but it's showing only an error page. So what I can do now is say, OK, I'm going to use the actuator, and then with that one I can see that my application is running well, and I could potentially start doing something. So now I could go in and say, I want this to be a REST controller, and let's say I'm going to do one thing actually that works as well. I just installed that. So it has added this code extension here. If you happen to have a Copilot, which I do since for a while, you can install that too. And as all of the new talks now need to have some AI aspect, so here is mine, add this Copilot to it, which would then probably help me and suggest me with hopefully very, very meaningful things. So you can see here now it says get mapping. I can use that auto suggestion, and now I'm getting all this hello world. So I'm going to say hello JCon, and I have to stop this one. One thing I did not add was DevTools. I probably should have done that. And I'm going to restart it. And after that, hopefully this endpoint will get exposed then. Just one thing, 1 second. OK, this is there. Open in browser. And now it says hello JCon. All right. So yeah, I mean, this is probably not the most rocket science software you have ever seen. But I just wanted to show you how quickly this would all go to spin things up. And besides like this extensions in VS Code, I did not have to install anything on the side. Yeah, so this is how it works. If what you actually can do as well, let me just jump back to that demo or to that repo. If I refresh this now, it will tell me I have a code space. This is active. And I can also say, I want to open this in different tools. So the default is that VS Code in browser thing. I could also say open in Visual Studio Code, which would then bring up my local Visual Studio Code installation that I have here, but also connect to that cloud-based instance. So it's trying to connect to that thing. So you see that open remote here below. So it looks a little different than as your VS Code might normally look. And if I say, OK, run a new terminal here, I can also make this a little bigger. You will be able to see this is not my local environment. And if I say, for example, make a new file, touch from VS Code, it's going to get added to this temporary repo. And if I look again in here, this new file is already there. So they're both pointing to the same container instance. So not all Java developers are best friends with Visual Studio Code. It is also possible to say, OK, please open that one in IntelliJ. So you can either go here, or what you will have to install is that component, the gateway. It's the JetBrains gateway. And this has plugins to connect to remote environments. So I also have GitHub Codespaces here. This will connect and basically say, OK, this is the one that I just created. And I want to use IntelliJ IDEA to connect to this one. This sometimes takes a bit longer than the others. Every now and then it needs to install a new client code. But we're probably going to be there in a second. So while this one works, I'm going back to my slide deck real quick, if I can ever find it again. Yeah. So basically, this is the setup of how things are built. GitHub belongs to Microsoft, so the hosting is basically done by Azure. That will probably run some virtual machines and a container inside. And this is this kind of dev container that hosts the repository, the language installation, the tooling, extensions, and so on. But it takes a default kind of shirt size for the power of that machine. You can adjust that and make it more powerful, but then basically your free credit's gonna go away quicker. From the code editor side, you can use all of those that are listed here. So okay, Visual Studio Code, either in the desktop or in the browser, your JetBrains IDE, command line, and probably a few other tools. When you do it for the first time, your VS Code will probably ask you for permissions, and then you're good to go. So this is kind of the support matrix that you're going to get here from your IDEs. Git provider is basically statically fixed to GitHub because it's, of course, their project or product. And the cloud provider underneath will always be Azure. Now, Gitpod is technically something similar. It's just with Gitpod, this cloud-based or cloud development environment is their main core product. So GitHub has, of course, other things than just this container-based development environment. Gitpod goes more in the direction to say, okay, this is our product that you can use. They predict that by 2026, so a lot of people will actually use it. Not sure about that, but certainly there is a certain trend going in this direction. So this works. I'm going to close that one again or move it away because otherwise I'm going to go crazy. This one, still nothing happening. We haven't been best friends in the past when it came to live demos. So I'm experienced with that now. So it says preparing Codespace. The Codespace should actually be running. Yeah, one of the things, this gateway, as you might be able to see up here, is still in beta. So that means it sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. OK, so it has to download an IDE backend with 1.35 gigabytes. This is very interesting. Well, we still have 20 minutes or so, so maybe by the end of the presentation we're going to be there. But I mean, I'm not going to do an IntelliJ demo anyway. So most of the people using it, they know how that works. So in this one, it will basically just point to that containerized setting, and you can start developing in there. But let's give it a few more minutes. What I actually did want to show is I would like to go in here again first. So it's of course all Git. So I can say this one I don't want to have, and say okay, first code sample, and I'm going to commit that. And push it. Yeah, okay, that's good. And if I go on Gitpod, this one basically shows me, do I have active workspaces or inactive workspaces? So here you can see I have some of my students, some former demos. We just talked about, there was a talk about in LangChain4j. This is something I played with just recently. And this is also, so something is happening here. Maybe not yet. Yeah, this is one of the things I use it most for. So if I want to play with a certain tool or technology which is available on GitHub, I just fire up one of those things and play around with it in a browser. So I'm not messing up my local environment. I don't need to download any dependencies. And if I don't want it anymore, I basically just throw it away, and I have no mess. So now I've just created that new workspace. Let's see if it can find it. Yeah, so it found it. And I can, this will also going to ask me which browser, which size of the machine. So I'm going to take the small one. That should normally be enough. And then in a similar style, it's spinning up an environment. So using GitHub and Gitpod at the same time, it certainly makes it over like 80 hours every month. So it's definitely enough room for using them pretty much constantly. At least I'm using it quite a bit, especially when teaching and accessing different repos of my students, and I have never reached that limit so far. Okay, so this one is waiting. This one is still, oh no, it's there. Okay, so now my IntelliJ is open. Something you have probably never seen in your IntelliJ before is that tab right here where it says backend status details. So when it starts, like the CPU spikes quite a bit. So whenever I access it with IntelliJ, the performance of the container goes down. So I would probably recommend, if you want to really use it that way, you should probably take the bigger instance. But in the end, you will have then your repo as you know it from here. And in there, you can basically see, if you open the terminal, we are again in that very same container here. Okay. Just this one, it's more difficult to increase it in size. Okay. This one has also started. And now I'm going to go back to my presentation. So yeah, you've seen that before. This is basically the auto-completion that you get from that Java extension in Visual Studio Code. Of course, if you use IntelliJ, the things are a bit more sophisticated there. So you have the choice of what you want to do. Now, with Gitpod, you have a bit more choice. First of all, it's not bound to GitHub. I mean, that's in kind of way their biggest competitor. So you can also point it to Git URLs available on GitLab and Bitbucket. You can also decide on which cloud providers the things will be started, and then you have your choice of all of the IDEs. Okay, so last but not least, Devpod. Devpod goes into a similar direction, but this is not something which is available like as a cloud development environment as a service. You don't consume this as a cloud service. This one is more like it turns yourself into a provider of such an environment. So it kind of pitches here against Codespaces. As it Codespaces, but it's open source, it's client only, and it's unopinionated. So what does that mean? First of all, the support matrix looks pretty impressive. So it supports pretty much all IDEs, all kind of Git repos, including like local directories which have been initialized, and a pretty long list here on the provider side. So technically it means you can pick all of those providers below, but you have to configure them beforehand. I mean, you need to bring for example, your own Kubernetes cluster, or your own VM, or your own AWS, Google, or Azure account. And then Devpod will spin up an environment there, configure it with all the things that it needs, and return it to you in one of the IDEs of your choice. So technically speaking, you install this as a client app, and then you configure that app to say, okay, my provider should be either, let's say, a local Docker daemon, a cloud VM, a Kubernetes cluster, and so on. And then that will host that environment for me. This makes it, of course, a lot more attractive if you don't want to use like repos in GitHub or GitLab public. If you have things locally, or if you have a local Kubernetes cluster that you don't want to expose anywhere else, then this one helps you certainly to move forward. I can also show this real quick. So, okay, this is up and running too. I mean, I don't need to repeat that steps. This is just has just like pulled the repo we had pushed before, and automatically discovered the application and started it. So, yeah, not much difference here. So for Devpod, I have this little icon up here. So I show dashboard. This is like a client application that I have built, that basically configured before. And can I make that bigger? No. I hope you can read it somehow fine. Here on the Providers tab, this is basically how you configure your backends. So you can say, I pointed it to an Azure environment, to my local Docker daemon, and to a pre-configured Kubernetes cluster. So if I go in here, now this is the shell of my local machine. So if I say, okay, this is my running cluster right here. So if I do a KNS, it hopefully points to that one. And this one I have been using before. So when you use it the first time, it creates a namespace called Devpod. And as you can see, this namespace is now empty. And if I go in here and just make sure I'm pointing it to the right Kubernetes configuration, so it's using my kubeconfig file and using that context, so that should actually be correct. And now I can say I want to point this to a new environment. So we have just built this repo. Is it github.com? I think, was it 24 or 2024? I don't remember what I did a minute ago. So it was jcon 24. And I use this URL. I select this as a provider. And here I can also specify what do I want as a front end for development. So I'm going to pick VS Code browser, for example, and then I'm going to say create workspace. This will launch some kind of execution, which I can also not increase, but it will download the latest provider for Kubernetes on my machine, and then try to reach out to my environment. It would have already failed if my cluster would not be there. So if I go in here again, we can see now it's spinning up a new pod. So it's creating a container inside of this pod, which is basically configured to run all and host all the environments. So the Git repo will be in there, the pre-built configuration, and this is something you can basically do and use then and provide as many different environments as you want to a multitude of different clients. Okay. So much for that. We'll leave that running. It's basically just going to go into a wait condition until the pod is ready and can be accessed. And it's probably going to steal my focus again then. So we will see once it comes up in the browser. Okay. Now we're here again. I don't know why this jumped out. So I've basically used this configuration, but I could certainly also just point it to my local environment. So in the end, you have much more flexibility, what you want to pick and choose from all the three factors. Where is the Git repo? Where is the backend? And what is your IDE? I should of course also say that this technology is a lot newer and not as mature as Codespaces or Gitpod, But I like to give it a bit of attention because I would really like to this project to succeed, because we certainly have a lot of use cases. Okay, now it has taken my focus. So you can see here the URL is now localhost, so that's kind of a redirect pointing to that Visual Studio Code browser, which in turn points to the code which is running in that Kubernetes environment. Now again, as this is fresh, I have to install all the things again, so I'm not going to repeat all that. I think you get the point. All right, time looks good as well. So what can you do to customize those things? Because what I did now is just go out and say, use the standard image, have a guess what I want to do, and it will come with a certain default environment. For Gitpod, it has like this file called Gitpod YAML, which is like the startup script that you can add into your repository. So you can say, what is the default image for that workspace? What kind of tasks should I execute? What ports to expose? What kind of extensions to put in? And of course, you can build your own container to host all that. So what I basically have done, I built my own container and said I'm going to use their base container as base image. Then I'm going to upgrade to the latest version of Java. I install some command line tools to make it look nice. I have the preferred shell as CSH. And this is basically something which had already happened here. So you can you didn't see that, but this one used my default image. So if I open this one up, and as a history, it has no history yet, but if I type it now, it already has auto-completion. So I can put in things like oh my CSH or whatever, and really tailor this towards the things I need. Sometimes I also import some kind of default history that I can complete my commands quicker and so on. Yeah, so you can really customize and tailor it to the way you like. And of course, this is particularly helpful to say if like 20 students use the same thing, I say use that base image, and then everyone has the same conditions for the development. Okay, now Codespaces and Devpod use a different approach, one that I actually like even better, because this is like an open source standard which is called devcontainer. And as the name just already says, it's kind of a specification to build containers that hold development environments or are suitable for development. They are being kind of built in a JSON file, which is kind of an alternative to a Docker file there. So again, they can say, okay, which one do I want if I just want a certain image? And then I can basically say which Visual Studio Code extensions do I want. So that those would already be pre-set up. And then it comes with a list of features. So I could also say I want Docker in Docker here, and I would also want something like a Kubernetes environment. So that would basically run a Minikube environment in a container. So you could also use this for like kind of a lightweight Kubernetes development. And with this kind of specification, you're of course very flexible to change things in a way that you like. And this will always kind of be set up at the point when you start the container. This is also something you can use without the cloud. So if you have a local Visual Studio Code and local container daemon, you can spin up those containers locally and also make sure everyone has the same environment. At the moment, we are building from my company a tutorial for OpenTelemetry. And if I go on this, so here's that OpenTelemetry training. And the things we put in there is on the one hand the Gitpod YAML and the devcontainer JSON file. So we can tell everyone to say, okay, either open that up in Gitpod or open it up in Codespaces or open it up on your local environment. And we kind of can guarantee that the underlying setup that you get is as identical as it gets. I mean, the cloud-based ones, we sometimes run a bit of an issue because the host names are different. I mean, here on a local environment, it will mostly be localhost. But apart from that, at least like the versions and things are then identical. And yeah, so if I go to that environment and say, create a code space, it will automatically detect that there's a devcontainer JSON file. I can run this in the background. Aha. Okay, so there is a limit. I'm just going to stop this one. I didn't know that I only can, maybe I have to delete a few of the old ones, but this is the first time I'm seeing this. So let's refresh this one. All right, and while this loads, I'm going back to my slide deck here. Now, as I said, for pricing, I mean, they have a, here you can see what the thing would cost if you go over the certain time. In Gitpod has this kind of credits that would go away. Codespaces has this quota, which basically calculates through how much usage hours and storage did you need. And if you basically go beyond that, you don't have to put down your credit card, or things that just won't start anymore. Now, JCon, Java, so I mean the good thing for here is that you can really use it very well for polyglot development, but I have certainly more Java background than any other language. So most of the default environments have SDKman installed, so you can easily set up your Java versions. You have all the various code extensions for Visual Studio Code in Java. Like of course, like same thing for Spring Initializer and things like that. Or you can use IntelliJ basically with the pre-configured settings that you already have and are familiar with. Now, speaking of IntelliJ, this, as I said, is only possible to like connect through this gateway, which is still in beta, and this also is not available in the community edition. So you need the ultimate edition to access that. Afterwards, it will do all the things for you. Yeah, I've shown this. Once you're in that gateway, you can now say, okay, I want to connect to a Gitpod environment, to a code space, or there are a couple of others as well. I haven't played much with these, so I've just been mostly focusing on the ones I've shown here. And then you can start your stuff as you've seen here. For shell, most of the default containers get initialized with a default bash, but they have other shells installed. So normally fish and C shell is there. You can configure OMyCSH if you want, and then add your command line tools of choice to navigate around even faster. For containers, you can, of course, you have Docker Compose, and you can use all the technologies like build packs and chip for advanced building of your container in the Java world. Good. So to wrap things up, I mean, when is this useful? I guess not everyone in here is teaching a class on distributed systems at university. But certainly this is not the only use case. I mean, the thing that I wanted to show you is, first of all, it's really easy accessible, so go ahead and try to play with it by yourself. It's not going to take a lot of time, and you're going to see the results very quickly. What we using it for is, for example, trainings. We provide trainings for software development. We provide trainings for container and Kubernetes. And we also were facing the similar problems there. So let's make sure the students don't have a local setup, so they can start their training quickly. They have an identical setup, and they also have a setup which doesn't require any changes on their machines. So we built student VMs that students could access either through SSH or through a website. I mean, even SSH is very often a problem if the company we teach the class for has blocked the SSH port. So we bypass that over a website where we have an embedded terminal. Now this makes it a lot easier if you have a thing like I have just shown, because then you have a URL, you have the Visual Studio Code in browser and also a terminal, and you can do all those things. So you can basically then generate one template and roll it out to all the participants, and can be absolutely sure they all have the same thing. The only thing they're really going to need is the internet. This is something that I probably use it mostly for. I mean, I try to get familiar with many different technologies. I mean, I've just mentioned LangChain4j, OpenTelemetry is things I work with. If I had this all on my local machine, it would be very difficult to make sure and switch the configuration nicely between all them. So some of the things I really just keep as these development containers somewhere in the cloud. You just need to be sure if you don't use them for 2 weeks, by default they get auto-deleted. You can just uncheck that. I've already lost a bit of work through that in the past. But yeah, normally I don't use them for 2 weeks. Normally I just really want to see, if something is good enough to be quickly compiled, spin up and see, okay, can I use that? Or will it take me more time than half an hour to get into? And for that, it is really very helpful. And I think with that, I'm already, well, I have not much time left. I have an end. That was a bit of a surprise that it came so quickly. I have the slides here, if you're interested in that. It will basically send you to, I think, Speaker Deck, and then you can look it up there or download it as a PDF. I think they're also going to be put into the agenda of the JCon conference. And yeah, so we have still a bit time for questions. But first of all, I just want to say, yeah, thanks very much for listening. And thanks very much for hanging in there until the end. I probably would have gone earlier, but I shouldn't say that now. Now let's stop this. Where is my Slido link? Okay, so what are some reasons to use a cloud IDE over a local dev environment that you have configured just the way you like it? I mean, this is probably the important question. It will most likely not beat your local environment, where you have configured all the things the way you want to have it. So this is also not what I use it for. So most people probably have a main project and a main thing they work with. So I'd still recommend configure a local thing to work with that. But as I said, if it's things like different projects, different other environments, you look into somebody else's code without messing up your system, then it can be super helpful. And I mean, this idea to have like reproducible environments is not new. I mean, it's a lot better than Citrix and things we used to have in the past, where people were not able to install their own environment, but got like connected either by a customer or somebody else to like a pre-configured environment. So this it's moving in the right direction, and I think it's just becoming more comfortable and usable. You have to decide for yourself if this is any help. I just wanted to show actually that it is possible and really easy to use. Have you tried it using with external Docker context? So you mean a remote Docker daemon? Who put that question up? Yeah.
So you can have like local CLI, but you can tell it to connect to some external server.
Yeah.
So basically, you tried it using like that, so it was not creating the environment on your local runtime, but on like a server runtime.
Absolutely. If you and this is for the Devpod part, you mean?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, for the others, you don't really know which context it is running off. You're just going to get your Docker daemon inside of that container. Yeah, so this one I have configured. We can actually look that up. So if I go on providers and say I'm going to want to add a provider, and I can say Docker. Oh, basically you have to edit this provider YAML file. I'm pretty sure you can put the remote address of a remote Docker daemon, but then it has to be Docker. Like, I mean, other container technologies don't run in a daemon style as Docker does. But also, if you just point it to a certain VM where you have the necessary credentials, I think it will create a container daemon instance there to spin it up in a container environment. So technically, it's definitely possible to connect to a remote instance or remote context. All right. Yeah, I think that's it. No more further questions. Normally I say I'm still around at the conference, but now unfortunately the conference is over. So if you want to catch me, just catch me on the way up. Otherwise, I'm probably also heading to the train station soon. Again, thanks for being here, and wish you all a safe trip back home and a nice Pfingstwochenende. Okay.